Well, the day after the end of a magical test series has always a sense of hollowness as the Border Gavaskar Trophy ended yesterday with India 2-1 victors. Welcome to Cricket Unfiltered. We're live on YouTube and, of course, recording for the podcast. I'm Andrew Menzel. People call me Menners, and I'm joined by my co-host Paul Dennett. Paul, we both made an appearance on Indian TV over the weekend.
G'day, Manners. G'day, everyone. Yes, we did. That was a lot of fun. And it was, it's been a very good series. You're right. There's a strange sense of slight melancholy at the end of it all. I think it's going to be interesting in the years to come how I look back on this series, because I thought the first three tests were absolutely some of the most captivating cricket I'd seen in a long time. Last test left things on a slightly sour note. But also, it's going to be interesting how we view the Australian performance, because having played so well in the final two test matches, it does make you start to do a few what ifs. And there's a few moments in those first two test matches that I bet they wish they could relive and maybe do a little bit better. I think India were definitely the better side. But yeah, it was an intriguing series.
It's quite incredible to think India have won the last four Border Gavaskar series 2-1, 2 in Australia, 2 in India. So clearly the dominant side when it comes to, the two teams. But I think we're catching them.
Yeah. I think I probably said this last time in the lead up to the series. In fact, I'm sure I did. But I'll say it again. I think if, this upcoming summer they were coming out here again, then I would expect that Australia could beat them in Australian conditions. I think that, as I said in the podcast the other day, I think we'll start as narrow favourites in somewhat neutral conditions at the Oval, although I suppose those conditions might favour Australia a little bit more. But I suppose, have we really progressed since 2017? 2017 felt like we came closer to beating India in India. 6 years later, I think we've got a better side than we had in 2017, but ultimately still on the losing side of things. So, I hope that the necessary focus is put on it by Cricket Australia for the 2027 series. Seems a long time away.
I think we've got a better team now, but our tactics in 2017 were better and we were better prepared.
Yeah.
So that's the frustrating thing. We're going to get into some headlines just on our appearance on Indian TV. Now, we've got a lot of Indian listeners. We're on a channel called News X. So if you're a fan, let us know, because I don't know much about it, but I'd love to hear from you if you watch News X. And I decided, Paul, to be in my best behavior for these appearances. No wild statements like I made on Star Sports about Jasprit Bumrah learning to measure his run up and then never being invited back. So I'm not burning any bridges this time. But if anyone watches that station, let us know what it's like, because, Paul and I were invited and, we just go on most things, but I don't know much about it. All right. Now, you mentioned you did great. As soon as you said India you were worried about India on those last 2 days of the test. They just played that clip over and over on Twitter. Now, you mentioned the World Test Championship final. So, as we said in our daily wrap, it is confirmed Australia will take on India at the Oval. Surprisingly, it's just a week after the IPL final, Paul, which I think gives Australia a slight advantage, because we will have some players in the IPL, but it won't be as many as the Indian squad. So I think Australia just gets a slight advantage with that.
Yeah, and it's also it then only precedes the Ashes by a handful of days. I think it's only about 5 days after the end of that match that the first Ashes test starts. The cricket calendar is hilarious. That the fact that it precedes that it follows the IPL by only a week didn't come as a surprise to me at all. It wouldn't have surprised me if the IPL final was on the same day as the Test match. If India said we're going to send our third 11, like that's the ludicrous nature of the cricketing schedule. Something's got to be done, but. Every time you look at it with a view to thinking what could be done, you realize just how difficult it is, I suppose.
Yeah, Sharma was talking about preparing for the World Test Championship, and then he sort of started doing the maths in his head about when the IPL final was, and he sort of said, I'll get as much preparation in as I can. So, yeah, if I was an Indian fan, I'd be a little bit concerned about that. Now, in the Australian papers, Daniel Brettig is reporting that the World Test Championship final might be Warner's last Test match. Now, Paul, I heard those comments from Andrew McDonald, and I don't. It's certainly a possibility, but what really annoys me is this ludicrous notion that the selectors would pick Warner with a view to dropping him after that match. The only way this would work is if Warner says, I'm going to retire at the end of the World Test Championship final, and then they pick him as a sort of last hurrah.
Yeah, I agree with you. He's either good enough to be in the side for more than one test, or he's not good enough to be in there at all. You know, if they picked him for the World Test Championship final because they thought he's genuinely in their best 11, and then into the Ashes organically, they then decided he wasn't in their best 11 for the first test, then that's okay. But to kind of, if the viewpoint is that that's going to be his last test, that seems a little bit strange to me.
Yeah, so there was also some chatter around maybe using the schedule as a way of sort of making this sound palatable to Warner and the public, that maybe Warner doesn't want to spend all year on the road away from his family. And, if he wants to play in the 50 over World Cup, the Ashes is a sort of logical thing to maybe have a rest from. He can, play in the IPL. Do the World Test Championship final, retire from Test cricket, have a rest, then play the 50 over World Cup. I mean, I don't mind that plan, but as I said, Warner has to be on board, because what do the selectors do? Go, well, we'll pick Warner, but then we'll leave him out of the Ashes. And he belts 100 in the World Test Championship final, and then you have to pick him to face Broad and co. So unless Warner's on board, the selectors just have to pick the best team.
It's a strange situation that you could say to someone, put your arm around them. Listen, mate, we really see big plans for you. We've got some exciting news. We're going to do this. Oh, yeah, you're not playing in the Ashes, but other than that, it's all good. It's like, wasn't that long ago that what's the point?
Exactly. All right, let's get into the headlines, brought to you by Piccolo Podcasts. And I think it's a good time to reflect on the Test series that just was. There was some, some good sentiments after the game. I thought Steve Smith talking about the good spirit between the two sides was actually very notable, that this was a series played in much better spirit than the 2017 series in India, and even the last home series in Australia. That wasn't in a bad spirit, but it did get a bit niggly towards the end, especially when Australia started sort of losing that series, and it got a little bit niggly. So this was a nice series in terms of spirit.
Yes, and I know that I've been banging on about this for ages, but I think that's a really good point. It was a lovely series to behold, as was the series against Pakistan before that. Now, some people who are all for the mongrel and the nasty Australians, and you've got to be absolutely fuming at the steam coming out of your ears to play your best cricket. I just don't understand that. I just think that surely this was a more a grander series as a result. And even back in the last series, when there's that whole they were they were praising Tim Payne for saying, "Oh, can't wait to get you up to the Gabba, Ash," and those kind of comments and everything else. And we didn't need it in this series, and we didn't have it. And the only thing that happened with that can't wait to get you to the Gabba, Ash. People in India now wear that on their T-shirt based on what then did happen at the Gabba, that India had one of their most famous victories of all time. So I think it's great. I think that the Australian players deserve a lot of credit. I think Pat Cummins deserves credit. I think Steve Smith deserves credit. And I think that so do the Indians. I think Rohit Sharma deserves credit. Virat Kohli as well. I mean, that 2017 featured that horrible sort of moment where Virat Kohli really lost it with the Aussies and lost a lot of friendship with the Aussies. And I just think it's nice. And I think that, as I've always said, you look at some of the champions in other sports of Roger Federer and great golfers and others that haven't needed to be boorish and nasty. Yet the Australian effort was still every bit as strong. They're still running after balls, diving, sliding to stop fours that other sides probably wouldn't stop. Usman Khawaja batted marathon innings. They're trying every bit as hard as they ever have, but just playing with a bit more grace, and I absolutely applaud it.
Yeah, I also think that there was, it was a hard series, and you could even tell that when Marnus came out to bat on the last day, he got a lot more chatter than the rest of the Aussie batters because he's always talking when the Indians are batting. So, but it had no nastiness to it. That's what I liked about it. It seemed to just stay out in the middle, and then everyone forgot about it. And you talk about Coley losing it. I mean, there was accusations where Steve Smith sort of signaled for a replay when he was batting and all sorts of stuff. So it got very nasty last time. On the field, most wickets taken in the series, Ashwin with 25 wickets at an average of 17.28. Jadeja was second with 22 wickets at an average of 18.86. And then Nathan Lyon, 22 wickets and an average of 22.36. Ashwin and Jadeja shared the Player of the Series award, and fitting award, I think.
Yeah, and congratulations to Nathan Lyon that to be almost as good as them in terms of the average for the series in a beaten side, to get the plaudits from Rahul Dravid. I mean, he was complimenting the entire spinning trio, but Steve Smith said it's the best he's ever seen Nathan Lyon bowl. I've apologised before for my idiot statement saying that he should be dropped after the first test. He's proven me wrong. I'm glad that he doesn't know who I am. And Todd Murphy averaged 25, taking 14 wickets, a real find, and hopefully someone that can be persevered with as well. So certainly one for the spin bowlers. Noticeably as well that the Indian quicks have very respectable figures, whereas the Aussies were pretty barren.
Just on what Rahul Dravid said, he said it's one of the best spin attacks he's ever seen Australia bring to India. Well, he said it was the best he'd seen. He said other attacks have had better bowlers in it, but this one was the most complete spin attack. And I actually do think that comment has some merit. I think, well, Stephen O'Keefe was a very good second spinner in 2017, but you've got Murphy and Kuhnemann alongside Lyon that both had pretty good tours. You consider that Murphy and Kuhnemann, it was their first taste of Test cricket. That was a very exceptional performance. So I think Dravid's point is well made and quite pertinent that, Lyon's getting to the end of his career, and now that there's a couple of real options waiting in the wings.
And credit to Cricket Australia and the selectors for what they've done. And I've criticised some of the preparation that maybe we haven't focused on this series as much as we should have over the past 6 years, and that some of the A programs have been pulled away. But that's very, very impressive, especially Murphy. They have got him over there bowling in Indian conditions. And so it's going to be interesting, though, because where does he go from here? It's not often that Australia needs two spinners ever. Nathan Lyon, I think, will be around for a while yet to come. So it's going to be an interesting kind of position for him to be in, that he may well be featuring fairly heavily whenever we tour the subcontinent. But other than that, might not be in the side at all. So that's going to be something that they're going to have to balance, and it'll be interesting to watch.
Yes, and I think Murphy will be the second spinner on most tours. I think he'll go on the Ashes, and if Lyon needs to be replaced, it'll be Murphy. But I guess Kuhnemann's the one who's really in an interesting situation, because it's very rare that Australia play three spinners. So he might not get a look in, I don't know, for a few years until we go back to the subcontinent. So interesting spots in their career, and that is kind of the frustration with Sheffield Shield cricket, that the way it's played at the moment, and hopefully this changes, that there's not a lot of opportunities for spin bowls. It's played early in the season, it's played late in the season. Doesn't seem like there's many tracks that turn. So, limited opportunities to continue his craft.
Yes, and it is valuable that it's not just tours of India, but I think tours of Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, and to a degree Pakistan, where that left arm spinner can be highly valued. I would love to see us focus on this and obsess on this, as that it should be that Cricket Australia say, right, what do we need to do to give us every chance in 2027 of winning in India? I'm often amused by listening to English podcasts, how much they obsess over the Ashes, and I love it. Like, you'll hear them talking the first Test match of the summer, and someone's bowled well, and someone will go, yeah, but can you see him taking a lot of wickets in Brisbane? You think, Brisbane? That's 18 months away. What are they talking about? And they're like, that's what I'd like to see, here, that a young spinner comes on, takes a couple of wickets, should be right. Let's get him over to India to see whether he's really got it. A young batter comes on the scene and makes a lot of runs, like Labuschagne, for example. It should be right. Much in the way that in the old days, Greg Chappell had 2 extensive county seasons in the early 1970s, and then when he went on the Ashes of 1972, scored 100 on a diabolical wicket and attributed the experience that he'd had in those county seasons. We've got to do the same for developing young players as well. I think we did it to an extent in the last 6 years. I think we've got to obsess over it in the next 4.
I think it's a bit harder for Aussies to go over there, but I think Todd Murphy has signed a contract with the county side, so that's really good news for him. On that, what you were saying about the way English obsess about the Ashes, and you'd like to see the Australians obsess a bit more about the Tour of India. I mean, I still think if you look at the sort of the general population of Australia, the average sports fan, so not the cricket obsessive, but the sports fan that's pretty locked into cricket, but not like us where their whole life revolves around it. That I still think an away Ashes victory would mean significantly more to the general public than an away Indian Tour victory. And yeah, I still see that gap being quite large.
Yeah, I think to a degree it is, but I think that the 2 key points are, one, although we've had a barren run in England of recent times, our overall away record in England is far better than our away record in India. That you would expect that at some point in the coming years we're going to win in England from time to time. Hopefully we're going to win in India as well. But if I said to you, guess what? I've just looked into a crystal ball. We don't win in India for the next 30 years. You wouldn't faint in shock, would you? It's a possibility that's but if I said we're not going to win the Ashes again in England for 30 years, you would faint. So there's that.
Well, I'm sorry. If you'd have said to me in 2001, we will not win an Ashes series in England until we don't know because we haven't won. We won't win an Ashes series in England until at least 2023. If you'd said that to me in 2001, I'd have probably had a heart attack and died. Like you'd be doing this podcast with someone else. It's still doing it with Patrick at the moment.
Yes, but I think that that's missing the point. Not missing the point, but 2005 we almost won. 2009 we were very, very competitive. 2013 we got belted 3-0, but as the next series in Australia where we beat them 5-0 shows, it was probably a little bit closer than that. 2015 it was 3-2, and 2019 we drew it. We were very much closer than we have been some of the thrashings that we've been dealt by in India. But more pertinently, I'm not talking so much about what the average fan needs to do. I'm saying it should be a Cricket Australia. It should everything that through the fibre of every fibre of that organisation should be that question of, but will he take wickets at the Gabba that I was talking about that the podcasters ask at every Cricket Australia board meeting? It should be but will he score runs in Ahmedabad? And let the decisions flow from that. And also, lastly, I think that the average fan now, certainly the Australia-India series is second only to the Ashes, and it's rising all the time. That I was saying that in some of the other podcasts, hearing mainstream radio that this time of year in Sydney is normally only going to talk about rugby league, and we'll talk about cricket grudgingly when it's really big. They were talking about cricket enthusiastically. They'd clearly watched it. They were eager to talk more about it, and that doesn't happen outside an Ashes series, really. Next thing is to try to get it onto free-to-air television if that still exists in 2027.
All right, now the most runs scored in the Border Gavaskar Trophy series, unbelievable. Usman Khawaja, the leading run scorer of both teams, 333 runs at an average of 47.57. We spoke a lot about him after his fantastic innings of 180, but really, what a story. After all the chatter about his performances in India, he silenced the critics. And it really was a comeback story as well. Virat Kohli, the second leading run scorer, the man who'd been in diabolical form for years in Test cricket, made 297 runs at an average just under 50 and returned to the century scorers circle in that final Test match and removed the significant monkey off his back heading into the World Test Championship final. Surprisingly, Axar Patel was third with 264 runs at an average of 88. And he really was, I guess, decisive in these. You talk about the importance of those runs. Those 264 runs were some of the most valuable runs in the series.
If I'd said to you before the series that Axar Patel may well be the difference between the two sides, oh, and by the way, he takes 3 wickets in the series, you'd have probably you'd have had a bit of a puzzled look on your face. That's yeah. I mean, I think he won them the series in many ways. Obviously, Ashwin and Jadeja, also won them the series because they were absolutely brilliant. But his lower order runs were crucial. Other notable performances, of course, were Cameron Green with his debut 100 and Shubman Gill, the two youngsters really coming of age.
Marnus Labuschagne was fourth on the list of run scorers, 244 runs at a tick over 40. He made just one score over 50 in the series. So that shows the consistency that he got a lot of starts. And I guess, Paul, for a player that hadn't been to India before, and you look at some of the great players that go to India and struggle on their first tour, he actually did pretty well.
Yeah, I think you'd say that's the case. I mean, in recent years, that would be one of his lowest averages, an average of 41 in a series, and 41's a very, very respectable average. He'll feel that it was a disappointing series, but still, the figures are certainly decent, as you say.
Yes, so that is the main stats. What do you think about the captaincy of Rohit Sharma? Because my sort of guts tell me I think India was a better team when Kohli was the skipper. I liked the way he led the team. I felt tactically India weren't as sharp as, I don't know. I just think India under Sharma is not the same beast as it was under Kohli.
I think I'd have to see him under more pressure as a fielding captain. I think that's where you really separate yourself as a captain. Now I know in this match in the first innings, Australia got 480, but it was a very flat pitch. I think where someone like Ian Chappell would distinguish himself is when you've got not much going on and his fielding positions would be suitably aggressive, his bowling changes would be suitably intelligent and aggressive, that he would elevate himself over the sort of the average captain. And so I'd like to I can't really comment so much on that. I think that he seems pretty calm, but I think it's one of these series that it probably didn't matter who was captain of in India, that it didn't make a decisive difference.
Now, you've got 3 turning points in the series, Paul. What are they? What are the 3 things that led India to walk away with this coveted trophy yet again and leave the Aussie fans in a world of pain?
Well, the first thing is India were just better. So they could point to some turning points of themselves where, their collapse in the third test of the first innings and stuff like that. But as far as the ones that really bothered me as an Aussie was forgotten now, but that first test match, in the first innings, Australia went from 6 for 152, which, we probably should have got 250, but we only got 100.
At least over 200 from there.
Yeah, at least over 177.
Yeah.
So to go from 6 for 152 to 177 all out, compare that to India, who were at one stage 5 for 168. And even when they were 7 for 240, then I've written here we should have kept them to at least 300, and they ended up getting 400. So they took a lead of 223 in the first innings, and I've sort of said maybe if the performances had been where we should have been able to get them to, the lead might have been 50. Now we got rolled in the second innings, and probably didn't really matter. But I think that the trajectory of the game would have been different. So that was, I think, disappointing. But then, it's no surprise the 2 big turning points that were super disappointing for the Australians were firstly that 114 run partnership for the 8th wicket by Ashwin and Patel in the first innings of the second test. Australia finished up with a lead of 1. They really should have had a much more substantial lead, but Ashwin and Patel sort of broke their hearts. But even that, having got to the next day to be 1 for 65, we talked before about that lovely cover drive that Travis Head hit on that second morning. And I said that was the last time that I'd been happy to be 1 for 65, leading by 66, batting ourselves into potentially a winning position and getting bowled out for 113. And, some of the shots were shots that they're not going to look back on very fondly. That's obviously going to be the moment that everyone talks about. And as I said at the start of this little summary, Indians could say, well, we collapsed in the first innings of the third test. We'd like to have that again as well. But just to indulge ourselves, if we could go back in time to that moment then and say to everyone, just play it a little bit differently. Don't try and sweep every ball for 6. who knows? That was, I think, the big moment that India won the series.
Certainly a big turning point, but I sort of push back, and I hate it when the players say, "Oh, one bad hour. If not for one bad hour in Delhi, things could have been different." I mean, they still got smashed in the first test. I think it was a terrible team selection in the first test. Kuhneman wasn't even in the country, and we saw how important he was the rest of the series. Head didn't even play, so I don't like this sort of, "Oh, we had one bad hour." You didn't really just have one bad hour. I mean, that's the one that stands out. But
Yeah.
I think Australia did a lot of things wrong.
But you're right. You could say, well, India could say, well, we had one bad hour at indoor, so let's cancel them out. So, the way that I've talked then, it's like a golfer saying, oh, well, I lipped that putt out. I missed that one there. I missed that one there. And, I should have got 5 shots better. Whereas in actual fact, I've not talked about the one where I fluked this and I fluked that. So, yeah, I mean, India were definitely the better side. There's no doubt about that.
All right, so look, let's move on from the Border Gavaskar Trophy because the one-day series between India and Australia starts this Friday night, Australian time. It's a 3-match 50-over one-day series, and it's a really important series because the World Cup is in India later this year, so it's a chance for the Australian side in particular to get some practice in those conditions and start to look at what will be their best 11 come. Is it October? I think it starts come October. So it actually, a lot of one-day series get sort of painted as being insignificant and uninteresting, but I'm actually really looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I was kind of prepared to do my usual thing and bag the hell out of it and make all my little jokes about it in 3 months' time. Even the players won't remember who won. But, I'm starting to look forward to it as well. And it's funny, every time I look at the Australian one-day side, because it seems that they're in fits and starts these days. When I last looked at the one-day side, I would have known every intricacy of who could be in, who could be out. It's like I'm starting at it fresh. I mean, who are is it Boone and Marsh, the openers?
It's because they haven't
Steve
played
Waugh
for a year. I mean, they played those meaningless games against England, and they've hardly played a 50-over game.
I
So I'm
know.
not surprised. So
Yeah,
on the
but I'm
team
looking forward
news,
to it.
yeah,
I'm looking
and
forward to it.
50-over cricket in India is still beloved, and it's also a great spectacle there. I think there's
Yes.
a lot of dimensions to it. The actual middle overs with the spin are a bit more interesting than, say, in Australian conditions. So,
Yes.
and so just on the Australian squad, Nathan Ellis has replaced Joe Richardson. He has an injury. Pat Cummins is not returning after the death of his mother, so Steve Smith will continue in his role as caretaker captain. David Warner and Ashton Agar are going back. So they've come home, now they're going back. So there are a few changes to the Australian squad. I guess the big inclusions, Adam Zampa, Marcus Stoinis, Mitchell Marsh, Josh Inglis, are all, and Glenn Maxwell are probably some players to watch. I mean, Paul, sort of looking at, I've got some questions here about what spots I think are up for grabs in the Australian 50-over side.
Can I just preface it just for one indulgent moment?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to derail you once you're going. And I know you don't like talking about players that aren't there, but how in the hell is Tim David not even considered for this side? This is, I know he hasn't played much list A or whatever else, but you just look at him, and if you're Rohit Sharma and Tim David's walking out to bat, you're nervous because he could do anything over there, and we should have him in the World Cup. I don't care what anyone says; it's a mistake that he's not there.
I don't know if he should even be in the squad, but they should be looking at him, definitely.
He should be the first player picked.
The first player picked ahead of Glenn Maxwell?
Ahead of everyone. His record in T20 cricket is so good, and he's so destructive. For the World Cup, having him in the side is far, far better than not having him in the side. He's the first player I'd pick. And the fact that they didn't pick him, it's just unbelievable. And not only that, I don't think they even contemplated him. They could probably pick at a second side. They wouldn't pick him there because they've pigeonholed him as, he can only play 20 over cricket. If he has to play 50 over, he wouldn't know what to do. He'd probably walk out with a tennis racket.
The only time I've seen David play 50 over cricket was for Surrey summer before last in England. All right, now, these are some spots that I think are up for grabs in the Australian 50 over side. So if you assume Warner makes it to the 50 over World Cup, there is one opening spot left. Travis Head's probably the early favourite, but I think it's a long way to go. Who do you think could slot into that opening spot?
Well, I think Cameron Green. I mean, he's done it in the T20 stuff. I wouldn't mind him opening the innings up. Your mate Steve Smith, I think that wouldn't be the worst choice as well. Travis Head, I've got no problem with him opening. Warner's a funny one. I've always been a huge fan of David Warner, and when everyone's been saying, no, his time's up, I've never said that. I'm at the point right now where if and I know these games don't matter so much in terms of the result, we're looking just for the future, but if I was picking the side for the first one-day game and they said, listen, all we want to do is win this game, we don't care how, I don't think I'd have Warner in the side based on that squad at the moment. I don't think he's in my top 11 from the squad of 16 that they've got over there.
I still think Warner's quite a good 50-over player, so I'd like to see a bit more of him. He did score some runs against England in that series last summer. The other option for opener is Josh Inglis. He opened for Western Australia in a recent 50-over game. He's a lovely stroke player and would do very well with the field up. So, that'll be a coveted spot because opening in 50-over cricket is very sought after. And then you've got the all-rounders. Now, this is where I agree with you. I don't think Maxwell and Stoinis, especially Stoinis, have done enough in 50-over cricket, especially considering their performances in the last World Cup, where I thought they were well below par, both of them, have done enough to say they're the all-rounder. So I could see Cameron Green, if he's not opening, playing in the middle order and performing, say, Stoinis' role as a finisher and a second or third change bowler. And then you've got players like Tim David, who also might make a play for the middle order.
Tim David?
Yes.
He's not in the squad.
Oh, no, I was just saying sort of for the World Cup. Like I'm saying, I don't think Maxwell and Stoinis have locked down the all-rounder spot.
Right, okay. I thought I'd had a stroke. I was like, didn't I just have a go crazy about Tim David? When you said that you agree with me that, and then you sort of said that Maxwell's not a lock for the World Cup, I'm still pretty much picking him for the World Cup. I'd like to see something out of him, but I think he'll be rejuvenated from his injury. And I don't think I could ever bring myself to have him not in this World Cup side. But where I'm interested is, do we definitely say that Cummins and Stark, and if he's fit and injury-free down the track, Hazelwood are in our side for the World Cup? In those Indian conditions, I look at someone like Abbott and say, does he bring more to the table than some of those other bowlers? He's a better batter. He's a very clever bowler. Ellis is someone I'm surprised wasn't in the squad initially. I'm delighted that he's over there now, but he's really grown on me of late as well. So I just think in Indian conditions, I suppose I'm saying I know that Cummins is not in the squad now. I don't think Cummins is necessarily a lock for my first 11 for the World Cup even.
Well, he's the captain, so going by
the but again, I don't. Of course they will.
But that's the problem.
I know, but just because they're going to make the mistake doesn't mean I can't point it out.
Oh, no, definitely. Absolutely. I'm with you on that. I like the way you're thinking. Sean Abbott, he's had some outstanding performances for Australia in 50-over cricket. He has, I think, the most economical spell ever in one-day cricket, 10 overs for 2 runs or something. So he's certainly one. You're right. Ellis brings something different. But, it's a real challenge to break up the Stark, Hazelwood and Cummins triumvirate. I mean, injuries sometimes do it, but I don't think the selectors will be that daring and break them up ahead of a World Cup.
Don't get me wrong. I love them. And I think that they're a wonderful trio of bowlers. And especially if Hazelwood gets back to his best, if he gets all of his injuries gone, and it, just emphasizing he's not in the squad, so we're not talking about for these upcoming games, but for the future, then, and Stark on his day is devastating, and Cummins is one of the best bowlers I've ever seen. I just think in Indian conditions where, you could see one where Cummins bowls a decent bouncer, gets a top-edged hook that at the MCG would be caught 10, 15 metres in on an Indian ground, sails into the crowd. I think I'd be edging more towards players like Ellis and Abbott. Obviously, I think that there's going to be pretty spin heavy. Zampa and Agar will be in there. And then you've got to also note that we can afford to go fairly hard on the batting because, if we've got the players of the caliber of Green, Travis Head could bowl some overs, Maxwell could bowl some overs, Mitchell Marsh and Marcus Stoinis, that if some or all of those players are in the 11, we are... potentially there's your 5th bowler and potentially your 4th bowler coming out of them.
I do like a long batting lineup in Indian conditions. Just looking at the Indian squad, some names that really jump out to me. Well, just on the news front, Shreyas Iyer, who didn't bat in the last Test match, is still in doubt for the series. I'm really looking forward to seeing Ishan Kishan bat. He's a very exciting left-handed batter. Hardik Pandya obviously comes in as vice captain. We know how devastating he can be. And Shubman Gill we saw in the Test series, but he made a double hundred in ODI cricket. So a lot to like. And then there's Surya Kumar Yadav, the most exciting player in world cricket. So it is going to be a blockbuster series.
Yeah, look at the squad; it's just incredible. Like you could, the vast majority of them just jump off the page as fantastic players. So, yep, looking forward to seeing how the Aussies go against them.
And the last time Australia played India in an ODI series, Australia were 2-0 down in the series. This was in India and ended up coming back to win 3-2. That was in 2019.
Was that Ashton Turner?
Ashton Turner and Usman Khawaja. I saw that he made a century in a match-winning effort. And it did make me think that Khawaja would be a pretty good player to look at for this World Cup.
Yeah, so would Ashton Turner, actually.
Well, I think one's doing a bit better than the other at the moment.
Turner did well in the Big Bash.
Yeah, it's okay. His form's fallen off a bit. Whereas I think Khawaja, you could stick him up the top. Say Warner didn't make it to the World Cup. That'd be a slot-in replacement.
Oh, absolutely. I'd have no trouble whatsoever with Khawaja being I'd have no trouble with Nathan Lyon being in there, to be quite honest.
Todd Murphy. Well, Todd Murphy's one that they should look at. I mean, he did so well. He did very well for the Sixers in the Big Bash. He almost got picked ahead of Lyon. He might be better than Ashton Agar in 50 over cricket. I mean, I know that'd be crazy for the selectors because they've invested, all this time in Agar and they're desperate to see it pay off. But why not Todd Murphy?
I think Murphy would be well worthy of consideration. I think his batting does need to improve. But I think that Agar has bowled pretty well in white ball cricket. And so he seems a vastly better white ball bowler than a red ball bowler.
All right, now let's move on from the ODI series because we've got a lot of news to catch up. We're still in India. We haven't left India yet because it's the Women's Premier League. This is a very Indian-heavy podcast, cricket out of India. So the Women's Premier League, it's about halfway through the group stage, and the Mumbai Indians and the Delhi Capitals are on top with 8 points each. The Mumbai Indians are undefeated, so they're on top. 4 wins from 4 matches. The Capitals, 4 wins from 5 matches. The real story is the Royal Challengers Bangalore, 5 matches, 5 losses. So disappointing from them to begin the tournament, an abject failure. And I hope their women's team doesn't mirror the sort of catastrophic run that the men's team has had in the IPL, because they remind me of the Melbourne Stars. They promise a lot but never deliver.
Yeah, the other thing that's striking for me is just, I suppose it's not that of a surprise in hindsight, but just the size of the scores, and the grounds are a little bit smaller, and in India you do get to the scores do mount, but several scores over 200. It's a vastly different sort of style of match than what we're used to in the women's Big Bash.
Yeah, so the highest score so far has been by the Delhi Capitals. They hit 2 for 223. They also hit the second highest score, 4 for 211. There's been 4 scores over 200. Individual scores, well, no surprises. Elisa Healy is on the top with 96 not out of 47 balls. Second place, another Aussie, Talia McGrath, 90 not out. And then the young Indian Shafali Verma with 84. And the strike rates, Healy 204.25, McGrath 180, Verma 186.66. So some exhilarating cricket. And then now this is, okay, Paul, just be ready for this. 3 players have taken a 5-wicket haul. Marizana Cap, 5 for 15. And then American Tara Norris, 5 for 29, born in Pennsylvania. So an American female cricketer starring in the IPL. What a story. Kim Garth, 4 overs, 5 for 36, the third 5-wicket haul. Tara Norris has played some cricket in England. She's that's where she's continued her career from a younger age. And just a fantastic story that a player from an associate nation would do so well.
Yeah, I mean, she did move to England when she was 8, so it would be an even better story if she'd lived the whole life in the USA and somehow had got into cricket. But that is pretty cool.
All right, so moving on, keeping with the theme of massive scores, let's move to the Pakistan Super League. Now, this all happened last week, Paul. The Sultans made 3 for 262 in their first innings. The Gladiators made 8 for 253 in reply. Peshawar Zalmi made 242 for 6, but they lost to the Sultans, who made 6 for 244. The Lahore Qalandars made 226 for 5, and they won pretty easily. Zalmi again made 2 for 240. They're thinking, okay, we've got to win this one. No, Gladiators 2 for 243. So that's just 1 week. Last week there were 6 centuries in the Pakistan Super League. Incredible week in Pakistan.
Yeah, absolutely.
So leading the top 4 are Lahore, the Multan Sultans, Islamabad, and Peshawar Zalmi. They're the top 4. Karachi and the Qalandars didn't make the finals. 3 Pakistani players lead the most runs: Rizwan with 483, Babar Azam with 416, and Imad Wasim with 404. Haven't seen enough of that, but I sort of lost interest. I think Matt Wade was with the Karachi Kings and then sort of got dropped and came home, so I sort of lost interest. Wade
Yeah,
watch.
so it's the sort of tournament I would more than happily watch every ball of, but the bandwidth is only so wide, and with the Border Gavaskar on and other things, I haven't been able to focus on it, but would happily do so one day if I could.
I thought about that recently. You know, there's the Women's Premier League at the moment. There's the PSL. There's had the Test series. I mean, can we just not just I don't know, find somewhere away from our families and have bills and jobs and just watch cricket all the time?
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. You have like 9 screens up somewhere.
Yeah.
Be pretty cool.
Whenever I hear someone say, "Oh, I don't know what I'd do if I retire," I think not a cricket fan. Definitely not a cricket fan. All right, moving to the domestic scene. As we reported on the Marsh Cup final last full episode, but it was halfway through. Well, Western Australia ended up winning in a canter over South Australia after making close to 400 in the first innings. But, congratulations to South Australia, because they've had a really dire run at all forms of domestic cricket. But finally, they're showing some glimpses of good form, and to make a final is a good achievement. So
Yeah,
congratulations to Jason Gillespie, friend of the show, good friend of the show. And then the big news was Curtis Patterson, the New South Wales captain, who probably only 2 years ago was looking at trying to reclaim his test spot, has been dropped from the New South Wales team. Probably deserved, because he's averaging under 30 this season. But big news, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really quibble with it, as you said. 417 runs from 9 innings with 2 not outs, average of 29.8. Scored them quite slowly as well, strike rate of 43. Very, very disappointing.
So they picked a fair few new players for the New South Wales team that are playing today. And I guess the squad will change a lot between now and next season. But when you think he made his test debut, made 144 in the test match at Manica Oval against Sri Lanka, he probably thought he had a decent career in front of him. Is now out of the stateside. So it's a real sort of, his career's at the crossroads.
Yeah, he did have a lot of, not, I suppose, bad luck in timing, in that he made those runs just ahead of the Ashes, wasn't it, of 2019. He was in that bat off at the Rose Bowl in Southampton, where the very bowler friendly didn't ultimately make the squad. I'm right in that, and I
yes, you are. Yeah.
And then we saw him, I think, the first game of the next season in the Shield, pull a calf muscle, I think it was, out on the boundary. And then he's kind of out for a while and has been in the wilderness to a degree since. So, yeah, when that, I think it's legally obliged to mention, has he still got the highest test average ever?
Yeah. And he was actually the first episode, the first interview on this podcast when it rebranded as Cricket Unfiltered. So another friend of the show. Maybe he'll have more time to come on the podcast now.
Well, hopefully he can bounce back. He's not that old yet. I mean, he could still do good things.
Yeah, terrific guy. I think he's a very good batter, and hopefully he turns things around. That's all the headlines. Thanks for everybody for listening to the cricket headlines, but we're not going anywhere. Let's get into listener mail. Now, I've been meaning to read this one out for a while. This is from Jay in Manchester. This is to the Cricket Unfiltered crew. As an Englishman who supports West Indies in cricket, I'm probably not in your normal demographic for listeners, but I have appreciated your work on this show for a long, long time, going back to the old Australian cricket podcast days. So for those that are just starting to listen, that the show started in 2013 as the Australian Cricket Podcast and then rebranded in late 2017 as Cricket Unfiltered. And then Jay has asked that he'd like to listen back to a few of those older episodes. Is there any way to find them? If you go to a website called Podbay, it has most of our episodes. We've done, I think, over 600 now. We've been doing weekly shows for almost 10 years, plus a lot of extra episodes in there with all the daily wraps. But if you go to Podbay, you can find some of our older episodes. And actually, we will be posting a lot of the feature interviews. We've had 15 Australian captains on the show. We'll be putting them on our YouTube page over the coming months. So keep an eye out for that. Then Jay says some really nice things about the show. So thank you very much, Jay, for those. But then he has a quibble with us, Paul. And his quibble was from when we were talking about when we downplayed Jimmy Anderson as merely a very good bowler in English conditions. He writes, of course, he has a better record at home, like virtually every other cricketer. But how many other fast bowlers are rated number one in the world at the age of 40 or taken 200 wickets at 20.56 since turning 35? From that birthday, he also averages under 27 in all 8 countries he's played in. For skills and fitness sustained over 2 decades, there is every chance that we won't see someone do this ever again. So let's just enjoy it. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's a lovely note, Jay. Thank you very much indeed. I think with regards to Jimmy Anderson, I don't think we're trying to downplay it. It's more that I think that we probably are both in agreement that he's a wonderful bowler, but that he's not quite the very best of the modern era, as some people kind of talk about. And I think the fact that he has that enormous number of test wickets, 685 test wickets, at an average of 26.0, that is incredible. And the fact that he's at this age now number one in the world, and he's had such a, all those numbers that Jay wrote. But I suppose I'm just looking at who I think are the best bowlers that I have seen since first watching cricket in the mid 1980s, and that's all I was saying. That I think, Men, as you said, he's probably not in the top 20. And after that show, I went and wrote down the ones that I thought, if I was being honest, that I would rate above Jimmy Anderson. It's not a criticism of him. I put him around about the 20th position in 40 years of watching cricket to be the 20th best fast bowler. I'm not meaning to damn him with faint praise. But in no particular order.
I think you can separate, though, before you give your list, I think you can separate his achievement in longevity and, having a very long sustained career. So that is an achievement in itself. But then you can look at other bowlers whose skills were slightly higher.
Well, yeah. And I think as well that the notion that just because he's taken the most test wickets by any fast bowler ever, but therefore he's the greatest, and England's greatest as well. I just don't I don't see that goes. And I always go back to the fact that you look at Test runs. Alex Stewart to this day is the 4th most runs scored by an English batter. You wouldn't say that he's the 4th best batsman that England has ever produced. Anyway, rough list of bowlers that I would rate above Anderson, not by much, some of them, in no particular order: Lilly, McGrath, Cummins, Alan Donald, Steyn, Philander, Rabada, Hadley, Bumrah, Akram, Imran Khan, Waqar Younis, Malcolm Marshall, Joel Garner, Curtly Ambrose, Michael Holding, Courtney Walsh, and Sean Pollock. I think that most people would agree with most of those maybe some of them would quibble with one or two, like Rabada. But I think you look at his record; it's absolutely fantastic. And I think there's 18 of them. If I put Jimmy Anderson at say 19, that's pretty good.
I'd probably put Cummins in there at
I
19
did.
ahead of.
No, I've got Cummins in there already.
Oh, 3. You've got him at 3. Wow.
No. That's not in order.
Okay.
I've just those 18 are in any order.
Good.
If I had to have a number 1, it would probably be Malcolm Marshall, followed by Curtly Ambrose. That'd be probably.
I'd probably have Paul Rifle in this list ahead of Jimmy Anderson as well. Terry Alderman. There's a few. Anyway, Jay,
Ryan
thank
Harris.
you. Yeah, Ryan Harris, fantastic bowler. If his knees hadn't given up, he'd still be going. But look, as I said, I think Jimmy's a fantastic bowler. As I said, and this is sometimes where you and I argue, Paul, is I still think there is something in the eye test, like what looks like it's better.
Well, if that's the case, he looks better than all of them. He's a beautiful bowler.
No, I just mean like what skill-wise, like, I know he's a very handsome guy, but just skill-wise, like
skill-wise, no, his skill-wise, if you had no numbers, you'd say he's the best of them all. Like his action is sublime. The way he swings the ball is absolutely magnificent. You're arguing for Jay now.
No, I'm just saying, like, when I saw Alan Donald bowl at the SCG, like that was hot. He was a great bowler. Fantastic.
Yeah, but I think people would say that when you see Jimmy Anderson bowl, it's like poetry come to life.
Maybe. Maybe.
But I mean, the other thing is that Jay raises the point that his record since turning 35 is absolutely phenomenal. Like the average of 21, I don't know what's going on there, and that's it's a hard thing for me to reconcile. And the other thing I'd say is I haven't done this yet, and if someone wants to do it, please do. Can someone check the average of of fast bowlers in England in the last since Jimmy Anderson has turned 35? Has the Duke's ball got a bit harder for batters? It seems to have been very difficult for batters in recent years in England. Has that played a part in it, or am I doing Jimmy Anderson a disservice? If someone can show that Jimmy Anderson's average has just organically dropped to 21 and there's no other explanation, then I'd start to have some truck with him being much higher up the list.
Well, great email, Jay. Thanks for being such a loyal listener for so long. We love hearing from the listeners. If you're listening to the podcast, the email is in the episode notes. So send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. There's some questions in the YouTube comments. We'll get to them. But now, first, it's that little bit of cricket news you just can't let go of. All right. So it's the Can't Let It Go segment. Now, Paul, I'm going to go first because I've got 3 Can't Let It Goes. I just couldn't whittle them down. So the first one is Mike Baird and Todd Greenberg, so the new chairman of Cricket Australia and the head of the Players Association, were both interviewed during this test series, and they both said that the negotiations between the players and Cricket Australia are going pretty well because they have a new basically contract to sign between both parties this year. And in 2017, it got very, very ugly. It was awful for the game. So I'm glad that it seems like things are going to progress a little bit more smoothly this time. What's your Can't Let It
Go? Well, my one, for anyone who wants to hear my rant on the pitches, please listen to yesterday's podcast that we did. I said my piece then, so I don't want to go on any further, but I do
Can I just say though, I mean, I got slightly annoyed. I was like, oh, here we go, more pitch stuff. But then everyone I've listened to since then has just been rabbiting on about the pitch. So you're not Robinson Crusoe on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they are a talking point. But,
why am I positive? What's going on? It's like I'm the positive one this last test match. It's flipped.
I just want to read out Harsha Bogle's tweet. I think we went a little too much to the other end for this pitch. It was too heavily skewed in favour of the bat. Puts into perspective how well the spinners on both sides bowled. And I think that given how, they're not necessarily always free to speak their mind under their contractual agreements with the BCCI, I think that's probably what counts as strident criticism from the cricketing establishment in India at the moment. So even Harsha Bogle has said that they got that pitch wrong.
All right, I've got 2 more Can't Let It Go. Now, this is totally off cricket, but I was just thrilled to see an Indian song win Best Original Song at the Academy Awards. So, any film fans out there, the Triple R song Natu Natu won an Oscar. It was the first Indian film song to ever win an Oscar. And I don't know, in Australia, when we win an Oscar, everyone goes mental. And I just wonder what the Indian reception was to it. So, if you're an Indian fan listening or watching the show, let me know, because if that was an Australian, it'd be on the front page of the paper. Well, it was really great to see them go up there and win that award. And I've been meaning to watch Triple R for a while, so I think I'll be putting that on the list to watch when I'm not watching cricket. And my final Can't Let It Go, thanks to Crick Info, they put up an On This Day, and it took me back to one of the most memorable matches of my life. It was the World Cup semi-final of 1996, Australia versus the West Indies. It happened on this day in 1996. So what's that? 27 years ago. Australia were 4 for 15, and then I think on the back of a Michael Bevan and Stuart Law partnership, were able to set the West Indies 207, and the West Indies were cruising. Lara was not out. They were 165 for 2 in the 42nd over, and then unsurprisingly, the king, Shane Warne, turned the match around with the help of McGrath and Damien Fleming, and the West Indies crashed to be 202 all out. And if not for the 1999 World Cup semi-final, this would still be talked about. It was just incredible.
I remember it well, and I think I'll add to that. If not for the fact that Australia lost the final, it would also be talked
True.
about a lot more. That the final defeat to Sri Lanka took a bit of the luster off that. But I would say that of all the matches that I've seen of Australia winning from coming from behind, that still may well be the most unexpected win I've ever seen. It's the sort of win that even if you watch the highlights now, knowing the result, you still think, oh, the West Indies are going to win this. It's just, I don't know how they didn't win. And there's like a run out towards the end. I think went through to the keeper and they ran, hurtling through for a bye and got run out. And so it was just, absolutely incredible. Can't believe it's 27 years.
I know. And Damien Fleming bowled their last over in that semi-final. He also bowled the last over in the 1999 World Cup semi-final against South Africa. And I had him on the show a few years ago to ask him about it. But truly incredible performances. So that's my Can't Let It Go. Ended with a trip down memory lane. Now let's go to the listener questions. I'm just going to read this one out. It's not a question, but Subik has said, "Good to see your faces." First time I've ever heard that from anybody. Now, Amit, with the psychological edge that India has over Australia, do you think Australia can beat them in the World Test Championship final? Paul, firstly, do you think India has a psychological edge over Australia?
Potentially in Indian conditions, they do. But I don't think that, and I know they've beaten Australia twice in a row in Australia, but no, I don't think that they do necessarily outside of India. So yeah, I think Australia can beat them in the World Test Championship final. I think Australia will beat them in the World Test Championship final. Not by, I'm not saying that as a definite. I'm sort of putting the draw to one side. I'm saying it's 60-40. Australia is likely to win, in my opinion.
Steve Smith was talking about the conditions at the Oval in his post-match press conference and said, the Oval can spin and it also can have a bit of pace and bounce, but it's played early June, so really does depend on the overhead conditions in England. If it's a cold, damp start to the summer, then don't expect a sort of dry oval wicket.
If it's a cold, damp start to the summer, it could be a one-day test match with the two bowling lineups on offer and the batting lineups that don't necessarily love the moving ball.
Subic. Now, this is a statement, but I like it. Ian Chappell has said that Australia have no positives to take from this series.
Did he really say that, Chappelli?
I haven't heard it, but it wouldn't surprise me.
What a legend.
Ruban. The last pitch conditions were the consequence of the scathing attack of the conditions of the previous 3 pitches by Australia's ex-players, media, etc. So no Aussie should complain since they wanted such a pitch. I mean, I thought the pitch was the way it was so India were more likely to get a draw and therefore play in the World Test Championship final. But maybe I don't know, being silly.
No, it was more likely to get a draw as well to win the Border Gavaskar Trophy. That was their most likely way to win the Border Gavaskar Trophy. I can see where Ruben Loganathan's coming from in the sense that there was probably some sense of satisfaction from the Indian hierarchy saying, well, you didn't like the previous pitches, this is what you're going to get. But I mean, to say that it's the Australian players and the media that can influence it, that's not true. That's it's up to India to produce the best pitches to produce the most entertaining cricket, and I don't think they did that in that fourth test.
Yeah, I mean, you could make a claim that India doesn't take criticism that well. All right, Martin Lawrence. Did you hear Ravi Shastri saying one-day cricket should be cut to 40 overs for each team? Now, Martin, great question. When I was living in England in the mid-90s, there was a 40-over competition played by the counties, and I was actually staying across the road from Lords, and I would wander in there with my friend and put the feet up and watch a 40-over game, and I found it very entertaining because it takes out that kind of boring 10 overs in the middle where they sort of, push the ball around. So, Martin, I think Ravi had a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good idea for Ravi Shastri. I just think it's too late for that the 50 over format is so entrenched. And the one thing it still has is tradition. I know it began 65 overs and then 60 and then went to 55, but it's been 50 for so long at the top level that I think if they went to 40 overs now, it might even hasten its demise. It might even just make people think, well, what's the point of even keeping it? And I
call it the 240.
Yeah, I was just I honestly think I'm at the point where I've said it before. I would be happy if they just said that's it for 50 over cricket. We have had a wonderful history, and now this World Cup in 2023 is a 20 over World Cup, and we're going to just merge the histories of the two because I think, as well as an aside, as much as I love ICC events, there is a huge dilution of the significance of World Cups now that there are two. Every 4-year cycle, that there are going to be two T20 World Cups and one 50 over World Cup. There once was a time in Australia when there was a palpable level of excitement that the World Cup of 50 over cricket was looming. If you went around the streets of Australia now and said, tell us when the next 50 over cricket World Cup is, I reckon you would be lucky to get 1 in 100 who'd know that it was on this year.
Look, I think you make some good points, but I really love the 2019 50 over World Cup. I mean, that was such a good tournament, not just the final, but I thought there was so much wonderful cricket there. I just think it's just should be contained to, 50 over World Cups every 4 years, and that's it. Because, as I said, I really love the 2019 World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, I love it as well, but I just think in the modern era, you talk about that they've got rid of getting to 40 overs, you get rid of the 10 boring overs. I think getting 20 overs, you get rid of the 30 boring overs, and that's
just end up with T20.
That's what I always say the joke. If you said to the IPL, "Hey guys, we've got this really great idea. Why don't we add just at the end, in the middle of each innings, we'll add 180 balls where each batter can hit 180 singles and jog a single each time, and we can add 5 hours to the game. Would you like that?"
All right, Varun, Manners, post that 2019 series, which Australia won 3-2 after losing the first two matches, they again toured in January 2020 and lost it 2-1 after winning the first match. Well, Varun, you don't know me very well. Clearly, I put the loss out of my mind because I try to only remember Australian series wins.
Well, I don't remember any one-day cricket anymore.
You don't even care about one-day cricket. You want it gone.
Well, I mean, it's,
Stay tuned for our 50 over World Cup coverage. It'll just be
yeah, absolutely. I'll give it, if anyone wants to fly us over there, I'll give it all.
Although, yeah. Anyway, I like the ebb and flow of 50 over cricket, but I think it needs that context of the tournament. So I'm still not willing to write it off.
No, look, I do agree with your point that it's better in India. And I think in some respects it's better in England as well. That with the moving ball in England, it adds something to it. And with the spin in India and also the smaller grounds. Whereas I think it's in Australia that with when the fielding restrictions ease after the 10 overs, that there is such pragmatism in saying, well, I'd love to hit a 4, but instead I'm just going to hit that for a single out to deep cover. And the bowler thinks, I would have loved a dot ball, but at least it wasn't a 4. And I guess the problem that both sides. It should never be a situation where if you said to both sides before the ball, this ball's going to be a single, and both sides went, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. That doesn't make for great sport, in my opinion.
Martin Lawrence, you should both do a cricket version of Gogglebox. Well, thank you, Martin.
Yes.
But that's called a watch along, and Paul and I would like to do some of those. Certainly, we'll head into the Piccolo studio sometimes and do them. Yeah, not sure when, but they're certainly on the agenda. And we've also talked about. Here we go. Varun was upset. He says, "You didn't read out my first comment in the chat box." He said that we'd love the SA tour of India in 2019. Well, thank you, Varun. We'll have a look at those scorecards and get back to you.
Was that the one?
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, so I was just going to say we're going to be doing some more IPL stuff. We've got a regular show next week, and then we're going to do sort of a regular weekly show on the IPL. It's going to be called the Super Over, and it's going to have the 6 biggest IPL topics, and we'll do it live on YouTube and on podcast apps. So, yeah, lots happening. Cricket never stops. Before we know it, it'll be the Ashes. But Paul, any parting words?
Last one. It's 42 years since the death of Ken Barrington today, who is a strange kind of, he had a very unusual record where he had a very solid first-class average of sort of mid-40s, but his test average was knocking on the door of 60. It's right up there in the sort of, it was like 58 or 59 or something like that. He died of a heart attack when he was the manager of the England side on the tour of the West Indies in 1981. And Ian Botham as captain and others were saying how devastated they were. And I just saw that. And I just thought, he was a great player in his day, long before my time of watching cricket. But Kenny Barrington, 42 years ago, died today.
Couple of on this days. And all right, well, that's it for Cricket Unfiltered. Thanks everybody for watching live. Thanks everybody for listening on the podcast app. All the details are in the episode notes to get in touch, and we'll be back next week.